Welcome to episode 473 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and I have the pleasure of being rejoined, as in the same guest for multiple shows, by Ines Braga Sampaio from Renaissance, because the only thing better than previewing a Champions League final is talking about a Barca victory in a Champions League final. But more importantly than the game, of course, Ines, how are you doing today?
Hey there, I'm doing fine, thank you. It's I've got a day off, so that's always good. And I'm in the company of my three dogs, so that's been better. Thank you.
Yeah, greatly appreciated by the puppies and by the dogs, and just by the calm that comes after a Champions League final has been put to rest. So let's talk about that one, a 3-2 comeback, historic comeback victory for the Barça Femení. And diving right into the game, I should say, stylistically, and talking about kind of the boring part first with the tactics, you were very, very right on your assumptions on your guest, Ines, that Wolfsburg were a lot more dangerous than I think a lot of experts, and myself included, kind of anticipated going to that match. And more so that those contrasting styles were on full display over the course of those 90 minutes.
Thank you for those words. But also, like, talking against me now, I expected, because I think this final was very much about what Barcelona didn't do in the first half, and then what they did in the second half. And of course, when you don't do some things, some very important things, you're opening space for very dangerous players that Wolfsburg have to do their thing. And I think in the first half, a key player, and now I'm like complimenting Wolfsburg, a key player was Lina Oberdorf. She's one of the best players in the world, and I think she was key to really keeping the Barcelona midfield under control. And then I did not expect Mariona to be the false nine, and I think that actually hindered Barcelona's game a bit because she didn't have as much freedom to roam around. And I think the Wolfsburg team was very ready for whatever Barcelona would do, and they were always on Mariona because they realized that she is, we talked about that. She is the disruptor of Barcelona team, so they were always on her, and I think Lina Oberdorf was key in that, as well as controlling Aitana. But then in the second half, Barcelona, there was a small adjustment, especially with Mariona being moved to the wing more, and Salma Paraguelo being on the center. And I think that really helped because Mariona had more space. She wasn't as encumbered. And Aitana, and then Aitana was key as well because she kept driving Lina Oberdorf away from where the ball was, and especially away from Mariona, which allowed Barcelona to move the ball more freely, to make better decisions. Because I think in the first half, their decision making and the execution as well, they were very, very off. Lots of rash decisions, lots of misplaced passes, lots of misplaced shots as well. And in the second half, it was completely different. It was a Barcelona we know. And I think that was key for winning the final. And then you have Patrick Guijarro, who is also an amazing player, and I think it was her best game playing as Alexia so far, because that second half she really did everything that Barcelona requires Alexia to do. And then she scored the goals, which is also an Alexia thing. So tactically, it really dependent on what Barcelona did in the second half. And of course, in the first half with Lucy Bronze's mistake, I mean, you can't make those kinds of mistakes when you have such talented attackers against you, like Eva Pajor, Jonsdottir, Alex Pop. I mean, that's it's suicide, so to speak. But Barcelona managed to turn it around. And by the way, I found it very strange that the Wolfsburg manager wouldn't play Julebrand, because I think she could have been a very good threat against Barcelona. So good for Barcelona that he didn't do that. And good for Barcelona as well that Jace came in, because she really helped get the game under control at a key moment. So I think what Jonathan Giraldes did to respond to the disadvantage is what the Wolfsburg manager didn't do when he was in troubled waters. So good on Jonathan Giraldes as well.
Yeah, well, Ines, I think you hit most of the major points from the match. So I want to actually jump in and dive into some of those even deeper, of course, to kind of break down again exactly almost the play-by-play of how this went down with this historic comeback. So first and foremost, the point you made about the first half, the numbers also bear fruit to that. The XG for Barca in that first half was over 2.7, while Wolfsburg was at like a 0.3, judging by the shots that they had, 15-3. And then, you look through Barcelona's campaign, and it was a very similar thing to Roma, where Barcelona had a ton of goals. The difference was Roma didn't score the goals that Wolfsburg did. And people did say in previewing that match that there was a recipe to beat Barcelona, and there always is a recipe to beat the idea of Barcelona, right? And
any team in the world.
Right, we're crossing between men and women, of course, here, but the idea of a Barcelona team that wants to pass around you, that wants to use their superior technical ability and superior positional play to find pockets of space and then break you down because they're better than you. And that is, again, the ideal of what Barcelona wants to do to beat an opponent. And that is why in the first half, it wasn't working. And that's how Barcelona has the idea of Barcelona, again, men or women, have lost in the past. That's how it looked like it would happen again. And more importantly, when I say happen again, it was almost flashbacks to last year's Champions League final against Lyon, where a mistake by last year, it was the goalkeeper in Paños, as well as trying to think who the other one who made it was one of the defenders who made the mistake. And it leads to the first goal very early on by Lyon. Barcelona get punched in the mouth, and then they do not recover. As opposed to this year, they get punched in the mouth and they do recover. And going on that, the idea of Lucy Bronze, because it's been a really interesting debut for Barcelona this season, because those who have watched consistently match in and match out, they have sung her praises, but they've also been pretty honest about the mistakes that she's made. Do you feel like, this is just about Lucy Bronze, do you feel like those who are putting her on the Champions League team of the season, or again, especially English-speaking media, who it seemed like ESPN FC, and I say them by name, but basically brands that are trying to reach a global or English-speaking audience, really put her on a pedestal for being part of history-making English national team sides, for having previously won with Lyon, and kind of almost completing her legacy a bit by winning with Barcelona as well, and putting her on that pedestal. Do you think it's fair, or do you think it is just an inflation of the English media to say that Lucy Bronze was as important, as significant to Barcelona as it seems like she is when the dust settled? Because, again, you're contrasting that with many of those who've watched her all season long and saying that, the mistakes that she made in the final were not necessarily completely uncharacteristic, but she wasn't as good as everyone says that she was. So, I mean, where do you stand on Lucy Bronze's first year in a Barcelona uniform? Because again, I think it depends on if you were watching every match or if you kind of wanted to jump on board. But again, the counter argument is that she's not, or she has not been as poor as, certainly, of course, she has not been poor as the final showed her to be, but she's been, not as impenetrable as some are saying that she has been.
I think two things can be true. Lucy Bronze has a legacy that no one can ever deny. She's making history. I think she's one of the great right backs in the game, but she's also getting older. And, some of those mistakes, you could see that she was, for example, struggling speed-wise, against Wolfsburg's very fast attackers. And that has happened in the league as well. You lose some qualities as you age. And I do think she's one of the greats as a right back in the women's game. But you also have to take into account that the game is growing, it's developing, and younger players are getting better and better. And that is not to say that Pop is unmatchable. Greats like Amandine Henry, Louisa Nessive, Nadine Kessler, those will always be, absolutely greats at the game. Jennifer Marojan as well. But also, especially defensively, the game is developing, and maybe some fragilities that some players have or have always had are starting to show a little bit more. And also, again, players age, so you lose some qualities or you can't make up for some of your flaws as well as you could before. And I think, Lucy Bronze was never like the perfect defender, the perfect right back. But that doesn't take away from her being really good and one of her being, historical. She's got a legacy. But yeah, her first year at Barcelona it's like, it wasn't as bad or as good as, those two sides of the debate have been saying. And then there's something to say also. There's something to be said also about like the British media, which, with all due respect, of course, it's and I think it's a British media thing in general terms, not just about football. But, and it's natural because you tend to overvalue what's your own, what's yours, and every country does that. Every if a French player played for Barcelona, they would be valuing that player even more than everyone else would be valuing them. And I think that's perfectly natural because you tend to value what's yours. That said, no, she has not been that good, in my opinion, in her first year. But she's also like she's world class, of course. So she hasn't been as bad as those first few minutes of the Champions League final made her out to be. But
I think she also hasn't been completely fit. I think has been a major part of that too.
Definitely.
I mean, she clearly didn't look 100%, and I think in a perfect world, I mean, Marta Tarjon, remember, is also a captain, and I think part of her not starting Marta was probably part of her say as well. Like, she trusted Lucy Bronze in a big match, in an important match in that situation. Yeah, of course, again, the coaching staff as well. But certainly if they felt like she wasn't 100% to go, they wouldn't have started her, because she did have moments too. Like, she did have a few moments. It was the goal 3 minutes in, of course, Payo grabs it. And then it was also a pretty powerful, pretty terrific shot as well. Panos had nothing to do. And then the 69th minute was the other Bronze moment where Bronze loses it, dispossessed again, and Wolfsburg broke out 4-on-3, and Payo went with the shot, 69th minute.
But she also had like one moment where she put Salma Paralluelo alone in front of goal. So, she had it had ups and downs. But I also think that like Lucy Bronze coming to Barcelona, it was always going to be a short, medium term thing, because I think the real target for Barcelona is the one that is probably coming this year, and that's Onavaque. So I think it was always like to fill up this void until Onavaque came. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and for those who are unaware around women's football, that is a Manchester United player, yes, but also a Spanish national or a Spanish international regular, and a player that, not to say is returning home, but in a sense is returning home.
Yeah, and she started off in Barcelona as well. So yeah, I think that was always the main goal, to get on Onavaque, and then until she came, Lucy Bronze is a world class fit for that. So I think we always have to put things in perspective. And again, she wasn't as bad as the final made her out to be, and she isn't as good as maybe for being heralded as the very best right back in Europe right now, because I don't think she is, even though I do think she's great.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So let's go through to that second half now. Again, credit, and a lot of credit is going to be given rightly to Patri, because Patri, very much like Alexia, very much like Aitana, the Barcelona homegrowns, if there is one thing that you can say about them, it is that they play best when the lights are brightest and they show up. Aitana last year or 2 years ago in the final to help Barcelona win the Champions League last time, and then Patri this time with the 2 goals, with those late runs especially. The third woman runs were essential in that second half in the game. There were some of them in the first half, but as you mentioned, once Mariona was switched to be a bit wider, Pariello, who is not a natural forward, number 9, if you will, comes into that space and occupies that space a bit better to take the attention of that back line so that Patrick can make those runs coming in from the midfield, which is how those 2 goals are scored. The first goal was also scored because, as I kind of mentioned, Caroline Graham-Hansen, while she didn't have the game that I thought she might have, Caroline Graham-Hansen getting by 3 players is how the first goal happens. I'm not disparaging Patrick being in the right place at the right time. She still had to finish it. She still had to get it right, but CGH put it on a platter for her, having got by 3. And that was kind of her moment, though. That was kind of Caroline Graham-Hansen's moment, because other than that, the one thing that being Wolfsburg also did was putting John Stodier on the side that they did to start the match, and then kind of recognize that a mistake was made, because John Stodier against Rolfo on the right was a bit surprising. You kind of get it, because you don't want to have her on. I'm wondering why they wouldn't have wanted her on her A, more comfortable left side to start, B, to have her against Lucy Bronze. I think the only argument is that while Joan Sadir didn't have the impact on the game that you would have expected, that's because Pop playing kind of off of Payo instead from that left and center part, where you want to get the best out of those two, which is how they did. They got up 2-0. So I guess they were willing to sacrifice Jones Adir, who I found to be really essential to what they wanted to do. But I also think Rolfo, to put her up against Rolfo, was dangerous for her, because once she kind of, not say tired, but that's what Barcelona is when they have the ball, is that they turn, I'm going to use the first word here, and I'll keep using throughout the rest of the show now, inevitable. That once Barcelona continued to have the ball in that second half and those legs for Wolfsburg got a bit tired, as you mentioned, they waited way too long to make any pivotal subs. It wasn't until after the 79th minute when Mariona and CGH came off for Pina and Cesagosevic, when legs came on for Barcelona, Wolfsburg still hadn't blinked and still did not put on players after, again, they spent 79 minutes at that time chasing the ball. And again, I think that Jones Didier, maybe she should have switched sidelines a bit quicker for Pop, maybe earlier in the second half when Barcelona scored those 2 goals. But those are just little things that I wonder if they could have done differently.
I think with Jan Zotter on the right, I think the decision was more defensive than offensive in terms of, because I think it was meant to keep Rolfo under control. And they managed that, because truth is, Rolfo was basically non-existent in the first half, as were some of the Barcelona players. I'm not targeting her specifically, but, it was, okay, here's the one player in the world who's faster than you, because Jan Zotter is faster than Rolfo, who is so fast herself. So they were like, okay, we're trying to, hamper Rolfo's speed and her, her going forward. And they managed that, because Rolfo was very discreet in the first half. But also, while doing that, they also, because it's always, you make one decision and it's never we call it in Portuguese a blanket with holes, kind of, which means that or a short blanket, because if you pull on one side, another side is gonna be uncovered. And that's what happens with football. You take risks in one way, and then in some other part of the field, you're gonna pay the consequences of those risks, because you can never have 100% of the field covered, and you can't be 100% effective. No team is 100% effective. And I think placing Jan Zotter on the right helped have Fridolina Rolfo under control, but also really diminished her ability, Jan Zotter's ability to make a difference, which she usually does, and really diminished their firepower. Of course, when you have Payar and Pop on the other side, it's like, okay, but you have those two. But still, I think she could have done more damage, definitely, on the left. And she could have explored Lucy Bronze. But also, like, when you have Payar on the left, you can also explore Lucy Bronze's, shortcomings, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I think it was very much a matter of let's not let them do this instead of let's do what we
Yeah,
usually
preventive
do.
maintenance, of course. Yeah, I mean, that fit the style too. So, yeah, and then let's talk about the second and third goals as well. I mentioned CGH on the first one, but it was Aitana on the second one where the defender could have done a lot better, but the defender jumps in for the fake on the cross. It was just a nice, beautiful feint by Aitana. Again, gets the defender flying, and then the cross into an unmarked Patry. You got to pick her up again on that late run for the open header or shoulder, wherever the ball hit. Didn't matter. Patry gets a brace, and Barcelona are back in business again. That one happened just a minute later after the first one, and that, I mean, with the comments that the players made in post game and after the fact, they admitted that it was mental. That first goal, once the dams opened up, the second goal was coming. And Barcelona, let's say that they owned their destiny at that point. That's why a minute later they score. And then you got the sense from that point on, it wasn't a matter of it wasn't a matter of if, but when that third goal was going to come. But I think the third goal, credit to the manager, credit to Gralsdens for the choices he made as well. You mentioned the sub that changed that game, and people will remember Alexi Bouteilles coming on in the 89th minute, along with Engen to close out that game. They were brought on. Now, everyone thought it was just symbolic to bring Alexi on, but then she had to defend for 7 minutes. She still had work to do, so it's not like she did nothing in the game. But the one that changed everything, that substitute, was JC coming on for Pariello, because seconds after that sub happened, seconds after it, Wolfsburg can't clear their lines, and Barca get the go-ahead goal because the minute JC came on, she came on, shot out of a cannon, and Wolfsburg were not prepared, as I mentioned, with those tired legs, to defend her speed and the intensity at which she entered that game. And that's a credit to the player herself for being prepared to come into the match with that level of intensity, right? Sometimes it takes, we saw actually yesterday, I will not be covering it with a guest. I'll have the 5 headlines for Celta de Vigo after this audio. If you're listening to the audio version of this, if you're on the video, just check out the video that I already put on the channel for that breakdown. But looking at the Celta match, Barcelona made their subs. Inaki Peña winds up giving up a goal. I mean, he could have done a little bit. He couldn't have. How do I say this? He probably, can't be too much defaulted for it. But anyway, Barcelona make the subs, immediately Celta score what winds up being the winner. But for the Femení, it was a complete opposite, where the subs were completely prepared to come on the game every time that they entered that contest. As I mentioned, including Pina and Srsa Gorsevic, knew exactly what they needed to do coming on in like-for-like positions as well. But again, Jay-Z being shot out of a cannon allowed Meriona, with that being JC, kind of being everywhere she needed to be in those seconds. Mariona crashing to the center, as you mentioned. Wolfsburg with a rough mishit. Patry pokes it over to Ralfo, and then she finished against her old club, basically making your own luck. In the box, create some confusion, bring out that intensity, bring your legs, and then finish the way Ralfo did. And then that winds up being the game winner. And again, at that moment, you felt like, yeah, that's the game winner. There's less than 20 minutes. Well, at that point, there was still 25 minutes, but we didn't know that. There was still 25 minutes left in the game. But yes, it felt like Barcelona had taken control of that. And then another big talking point to that point, though, Ines, is that many Kool-Aids, again, who primarily just watch the men's team, many who are listening to this, again, don't even have access to watch the women's team regularly. I watch them when available, but here in the United States, they're not always available, right? So we're not on that journey with them game in and game out. So many Kool-Aids, and they have some of them since apologized on social media and the like, because they got the feeling that this is Europe and this is Barcelona, regardless of men or women's team, that there's this thing that's going to happen. But they forgot the word that you said, and I have my own word, right? I use inevitable, you use ruthless. And that is the thing that separates the Barça Femení over the last 4 seasons from the men's team. The Barça Femení are the best thing that are happening at the club at the moment, and have been for the last few seasons. Now winning 2 Champions League finals in 4 years, because this team has a switch to flip that they can flip, and they did at halftime. That flip I mean, you could see they came out halftime. They said, okay, the difference here is that we are better and we haven't put the ball in the back of the net. And the difference is going to be we're going to put the ball in the back of the net. And there is a mentality to them. There is a strength to them. And there's also a way where, unlike it seems like the men's team in Europe, where they're like, okay, we made these mistakes because that's who we are. And then they sink into that shell. And the Femení were different because CG8 said it after the fact too, that they did have those fears. They did see Lyon in their mind's eye. They did think about last year's Champions League final, and they went, oh no, is that happening again? But instead of wilting, instead of letting it happen again, they did the complete opposite. And they seized that game, and they won that game. They took that game from Wolfsburg, who were up 2-0, and they decided to win that game as opposed to Wolfsburg even allowing them to come back. Because again, I think, no, I'm not disparaging, again, the first Wolfsburg goal, but I mean, if Lucy Bronze doesn't make that mistake 3 minutes in, I think Barcelona even get the first goal in the first half. They were the better team the entire game, and they earned it. Definitely. And they took it. And that is the difference between the Barça Femení and the Barça men. And again, for those who apologize on social media, credit to you for getting it wrong, because again, they are ruthless and they are inevitable, and they are all those words that mentally, again, I think the men's team of Barcelona could take a page out.
And I think it helped them. This may seem almost like antithetical, but the truth is, I think having lived the experience of last year's final with everything that happened, I think it did help them mentally for this final. And I think this final will make them even stronger mentally. And like I said, yeah, they're ruthless. It feels like it's inevitable. A touch of Thanos here. But maybe like, and let me sing, because you said you talked about CGH, and I haven't sung her praises enough, because I think she's a key part of that ruthlessness, because, you know, the way she keeps trying, and yeah, it wasn't her best first half, and Wolfsburg had, you know, they did their homework clearly. They didn't give her a lot of space, but the way she goes and again and again and again and again, you know, and she goes like the 100th time, she does it with as much momentum and as much impetuousness as the first time. Because for her, it's like rinse and repeat. And it's that ruthlessness, that, you know, feeling of, okay, no, I'm going to get it, whether it be the first time I try it, or the 20th, or the 100th. And it really, that kind of thing really inspires like a whole team, I think. And I think she's one of the faces of this team also, because, you know, she really like embodies that spirit. And such like her, it's Aitana, for example, who was key to, you know, unlocking Barcelona in the second half, and Mariana, again, who, like, we were talking about her last time, and I think it was after the program that we were saying, like, she's not the fastest, she's not the most skilled, she's not the strongest, even though she's fast, she's skilled, she's strong, but I think there's one thing that no one else in the world can do like her, which is disrupting the game, going against the game plan in a way that is planned, and, you know, creating those pockets of space, creating those advantages. And she was able to do that in the second half. And going back to Caroline Graham-Hansen, I just want to say this. I think she's in a very like special, unique tier in the women's game, and even in the men's game, which, like, talking about the women's game, I only see one player in the world that is like her, and that's Mallory. I'd switch the letters. Mallory Swanson from the United States. Lauren James of Chelsea is also very much like that, but she's still a step below. But those two players can change a game in an instant, which is what Caroline Graham-Hansen did, with their skill and their speed and their their like lack of, well, with their gal, so to speak, you know, because they have that gal, they have that like healthy hubris, you know, of knowing that they can do this, and they can change a game from one moment to the other. And those two players are unique in the world in the women's game. And I also, like, in terms of style, I'm not talking in terms of like, I don't like comparing, you know, but in terms of who those players are, I only see like 2 or 3 players in the men's game that are exactly like that. and I can say it's like it's Rafael Leão, AC Milan, Kylian Mbappe, PSG, like those kinds of players. They have the pace, the skill to suddenly make a run, and the whole defense is upended, and someone or they or someone else scores, and the game is won, and that is Caroline Graham Hansen, in my opinion.
Well, I would say as far as individual awards go, I mean, because the Women's World Cup is this summer, it's going to be very difficult to get a Ballon d'Or winner from Barcelona because of the World Cup taking center stage. Of course, I think the best player in that tournament is likely going to win the Ballon d'Or. And I would say if Norway, though, here's what I'll say: if Norway, led by Caroline Graham Hansen, winds up getting to, let's say, the semifinal and is the leading goal scorer in that World Cup, even if they don't win it, right? Let's say there are just two teams without a figurehead, if you will, to get to the final or to win the World Cup. If Norway makes some kind of magical run and gets to maybe even the quarterfinal, and she had 8 goals or something and wins the Golden Boot, then obviously I think if you're Barcelona especially, you want to start that PR machine now for Caroline Graham Hansen as your, we'll say, Ballon d'Or nominee.
Yeah,
right?
I would really like to see her get due recognition, because in the lot, like, I don't put too much stock in awards, but the truth is they matter to players especially, and we've seen last few years she's been like incomprehensibly snubbed for all those awards. Like, she wasn't in the best 25 for the Ballon d'Or this year, like for 2022, which is
outrageous.
Yeah. It's outraging. It's like, do you watch women's football? Do you?
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is certainly one of the best 25 players in the world. It's one of
I'll correct you that I don't think they watch women's football in Spain, because it's very difficult to watch women's football in Spain because a lot of those stadiums are not up to snuff. A lot of those broadcasts are not up to snuff. And I think people do hold it against Barcelona for winning too much in the league. It's like, why would you watch a foregone conclusion if you could watch the WSL with
I mean, I get it, but like, she is not one of the 25 best players in the world. She's one of the best, one of the 10 best.
Yeah,
one of the 5 best. She's like,
right.
And she is incomparable because there is no one like her. There's only one player like her in the whole world. That's Mallory Swanson. And I mean in terms of style and but how she can impact a game, because those two players, and like Sophia Smith as well, Trinity Rodman, and you have so many players that can impact the game. Of course, Viviana Miedema, you have Kadidia Tudiani, Marie-Antoinette Katoto, yes, and you have like from Lyon, Caterina Macario. You have so many talented players, of course, but like that specific style, that specific way in which they impact the game, CGH and Swanson, again, those two players are unique, and they're definitely, most definitely, every single season amongst the top 10 players in the whole world. So I really don't get the how they can snub CGH from those awards, because it's just, you don't watch it clearly, because otherwise she would be a mainstay.
And a programming note for Mallory Swanson, for those who've been following women's football in the U.S. for a few years now, don't be confused. Mallory Swanson, formerly Mallory Pugh. So if you're wondering, Mallory Pugh didn't get hurt or go anywhere. Well, Mallory Swanson did get hurt, and as did Carolina. Like, they have been some major injuries too on the U.S. women's side. Again, the World Cup is going to have a big deal. Again, if the U.S. women wind up winning, then you're going to look at names like that to potentially win the Ballon d'Or. Again, individual work,
Smith, especially,
individual work on everything. Sophia Smith as well. Just, I mean, there's no containing her for 90 minutes, certainly. So 2 more questions before we go.
Yeah.
We mentioned about Barcelona, and I do want to use the word dynasty here, because now it's 2 in 4 years, and it certainly could be, if they win next year, that'll be 3 in 5 years, or 3 in 4 years, I should say. And that means a dynasty, right? 3 in 4 years, that means that you were the team on top. And the only other dynasties we've seen, I guess you could say, the back-to-back from Wolfsburg 10 years ago, and then of course Lyon, who dominated the entire decade, right? Like, those are the two European dynasties, if you will, that we saw. Again, Lyon really maybe the only one credited for getting those 3 or more than 3 in the way they did. It was a 7 and 10 or something like that over the last 10 or 12 years or whatever.
Yeah,
but anyway,
it's absurd.
The point is, I think that the third one is actually going to be the hardest of this bunch, because while experience is essential, like Aitana and is still in her prime, or still even entering her physical prime. Patri, the same thing, still entering her prime. As you mentioned, yeah, Lucy Bronze is on the downward, but Ona is basically on her way, done and dusted already, that deal. Alexia is going to be healing up, so a full, healthy, hopefully healthy year of Alexia Putellas, who is still in her prime, certainly. Still, I think she doesn't turn 30 for another year or two. And then,
yeah, she's from
and then they're
94.
94, yeah. So then they're going to keep padding out the team as well. You can expect, I think, one more big forward signing, Claudia Pina. There were worries that she may never get the time, and not only has she gotten the time, but she is going to continue to be great. She is in her early 20s, still breaking in. It is scary, the idea that Claudia Pina is just breaking in, because another player we don't really need to go completely off on, because she just played a sub role. But again, a player that got hurt. But as far as that ruthless mentality that you want from your Barca Femení players, Claudia Pina might be the most ruthless forward in terms of just, we already put their face in the mud, but we got to keep just putting
Yes.
that, just keep pushing down. And that's how Claudia Pina is. That's her personality. She just wants more goals. That's what she wants. That's what she comes on the field to do. That's what she wants. And she is still getting young. So the point is, while the Femení, I think they're certainly, their roster's not going to get any worse. Their squad's not going to get worse. But my argument for what makes it more difficult is kind of what we saw all season in the women's game in Europe, is that Wolfsburg, Bayern Munich, Chelsea, Man City, Manchester United, Arsenal, they're Real Madrid, they're PSG, Lyon. There are now, I mean, to my count, 9. You can even add 1 or 2 more if you want. I mean, Roma had their moment, certainly, but I think they're certainly a tier down. But you have at least 8 or 9 teams that are capable of winning the Champions League. I mean, luck is going to be important, yes, but you have a lot of sides who are investing, clubs who are investing in their women's game. And I think there is no time in women's football history where it has been deeper and has been more difficult to win. I think one of the only clubs that are really historically taking a step back is Atletico Madrid. And I would hope that they reinvest again. And I would hope that it becomes a 3-horse race. Well, you could argue that it's still just Barca Femení, but Real Madrid is catching up. Like in the league table, Real Madrid did not lose very much. And while Barca Femení were inevitable, if not for them, then Real Madrid would have blown out the competition in the Spanish league. So, I mean, there's Real Madrid, but you hope that Atletico Madrid reinvests in that part of their club and tries to push forward again. But yeah, I mean, that's Spanish football. But overall in Europe, it has never been deeper and has never been more difficult to win the Champions League.
Yeah, it's great to see, as you know, a more like third-party observer, like how many teams are getting stronger. Lyon have always, of course, been the strongest. We can still say Lyon are the best team of all time, at least right now. For now,
yeah.
They are the best team of all time, period. But like seeing Bayern Munich getting stronger, they won the league again. Seeing Arsenal getting stronger, what they did against Wolfsburg was amazing. Chelsea has some issues because they have such a strong squad, but it's not always. It's like, I don't want to say this, but I think it's not always like led in the best way possible, in my opinion. Manchester United also getting stronger. Well, you said all the names basically, so it's beautiful to see, to be honest. And I think that is going to make it more and more difficult for Barcelona to win the Champions League in future years. And I hope it gets more difficult because it means that women's football is growing ever stronger. But yeah, Barcelona, like, it's not mutually exclusive. Barcelona are the strongest team in the world right now. And it's also going to continue being very, very difficult to beat Barcelona, especially in 2 games. And Barcelona are also getting stronger because you mentioned all those names, and also Bruna Vitamala, who had a really tough injury, because she, before that injury, she was scoring goals left and right with so little game time. So Barcelona are building, because they're putting down the building blocks for a bright future. You have Salma Paraduelo, who is like 19, if I'm not mistaken. You have Vicky Lopez, who is 16. Crazy talents. And
yeah, we didn't see her, but she had just come off a U17
U17, yeah.
U17 where she was easily Spain's best player. They wind up losing in the final, but she was arguably the player of the tournament. And yeah, Vicky Lopez is a star in the making. I
She
mean,
is. She
this is
is.
and when you're talking about, again, the men's side of things, you are talking about Gabi here. Like, there is a fair comparison between Gabi and Vicky Lopez because these are prodigies at 16 years
Yeah.
old. They're ones that they're showed up, and you're like, oh, this kid is ready to go from the minute she laces up her boots. And yeah, Vicky Lopez is a future star who is not going to go anywhere. If anything, again, no disrespect to her, but if I'm Vicky Lopez plays a little farther forward, but if I'm Engen, I'm like, oh no, like once Kiara Walsh showed up, and if I'm Engen, I'm like, where are my minutes going to be as Vicky Lopez earns more minutes? Because again, Patry allows you to play whatever formation you want. Whoever you want to get on the field, Patry can be one of those midfield trios, and then you can get whatever formation, whatever grouping you want. Because Aitana's going to go where she goes. Alexia, whether she plays, as you said, as a false nine or as an attacking midfielder, wherever you need her as one of those front two. But then you have Kerry Walsh, and you have other players that can also play in that more defensive role. Because again, if you want to play Vicky Lopez, you can play Vicky Lopez and then have Walsh and Patry protecting her. So there are iterations that you can throw. And then again, poor Engen, she's gonna see her minutes dry up. And then speaking of Vicky Lopez, over the summer, this is kind of the last thing to kind of bother you about. It is a real shame that going off of Alexia and Aitana and Patry and their moment, Mappy Leon, as I mentioned too, Panos, that the Spanish national team at the World Cup is going to be really disappointing for Barca fans heading into this, because we will not see, Patry said it today, that she will not be at the World Cup unless something drastically changes. So can you just, for those who have not been following it, break down that conflict and then where we currently stand with that conflict? Because again, Spain is not going to look like the way that any Barcelona fan would want it to look for the World Cup.
Yeah, so like there's this group, which the Spanish call Las Quince, so the 15, which is like a bunch of Barca players, along with some players from other teams like Atletico Madrid, Real Sociedad. So like, who were like, okay, the conditions that we have right now in the national team are not enough. We don't think we think that we are not being valued enough, or like we are not getting enough conditions for our value, for what we know we are worth, because we want to win trophies and we haven't won any trophy at all, because these are the problems. And they listed the problems to the federation. And among some rumors, they say they never required the Jorge Villa, who is the Spain national team manager. They said they never required that he leave. They just said that some things need to change. So they were like, yeah, some things need to change. Otherwise, we are not playing for the national team again. And the Spanish Federation was like, well, we do not, negotiate when, with ultimatums. So yeah, bye-bye. And the players, so as things stand right now, because there's a lot of antagonization right now, because Jorge Villa has been very, he's very clearly taken a stance of, I have done absolutely nothing wrong, and these players are spoiled brats. Some of the Spanish media, especially the Spanish media that cares about men's football. So Spanish media that cares about women's football, they have all taken the players' side. Spanish media that knows nothing about women's football, only covers men's football, are like, oh, these spoiled brats. So you can see who probably.
I can't believe it that the institutional methods of power in Spain decided to not go with the players. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. So shocking.
Exactly. And then there's some sus stuff, like Jorge Villa is I'm not sure if I'm saying the right position, but like the technical director of the national team, as well as the national team manager. His father was a historical figure in the Spanish Federation. Vilda was instrumental as well in the current president of the Spanish Federation rising to power, Luis Rubiales. So there's a lot of friendliness amongst the Spanish Federation, the powers that be, and the powers that want to stay being. And and like women's football is still sort of small, so the players, unfortunately, are still the ones with the least power, and they tried to make a change. They were villainized for wanting to make that change. So they were ousted from the national team entirely. And the national team had some decent results. So they were like, "See, we don't need them, though they are the problem," which is totally false. So as things stand, we're not going to watch at the World Cup players like Mapi Leon, Patrick Guijarro, Mariona Caldente, Aitana Bonmati, like I'm thinking of more names, but those are the ones I can remember right now.
Yeah, the list I have is Ona Bate from Manchester United,
Yes,
Aitana Mariona, Patri Mapi Leon, Leila, former Barcelona player, now
exactly,
Man City, Sandra Panos, Andrea Pereira, who's now Club America, who was at Barcelona last year,
exactly.
Claudio Pina. But we'll have to see too, because then there have been Barcelona players that have been named to recent squads, including Irene
Yes,
Paredes, including Lea Cordina, including Jana Fernandez. So yeah, on the younger side for Barcelona, including
yes.
Maria Perez, who's a Barcelona
Laia
B player as
Codina,
well.
Laia Codina
Salma
was
was also
a
named.
exactly. Laia Codina was like it was a bit controversial because she's like she wasn't one of the 15, which
Right.
caused some controversy. And then you have like the Real Madrid players, and well, let me just say like it's not I do not want to villainize any player at all. So like I think the players are always like and especially in Real Madrid's case, I think they're being like instrumentalized a bit, because to create that impression that it's Barcelona and the Barcelona players, to villainize them, and they're using maybe allegedly the Real Madrid players to create this narrative of rivalry that is just not fair
I mean,
or
what
true.
blew it up? What blew it up was that Aitana, after that first El Clasico, after all this went down, did not shake the hand of Misa Rodriguez, and that the goalkeeper for Real Madrid
Yeah,
and the Spanish national team, and that kind of set all this in motion as
yeah,
well. But yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like there is a resolution coming. So again, the Spain that you're going to see at the World Cup is not the Spain that you would expect to
exactly.
see. You're accustomed to see.
Yeah.
So I mean,
And
as far
Irene
as
Paredes was reinstated, by the way, because she went through an especially difficult time because she was named at first, she was named as the figurehead of the revolution, but
yeah,
in a negative light. And then she was actually reinstated, which created even more like, I think it was a way, and this is my personal interpretation, because I think she was so villainized, like so vilified those like first few months for being, the leader of the revolution that, I think she tried to like sort of protect herself. And I think she did it with sort of the blessing of those other players, because, to protect her image, to protect, because she was crying at some point in a press conference about that. So I think it was a way to protect her, to protect her image, protect her mental health as well. And I think she had like not that she needed, because I'm not in there, but it feels like she had the blessing of the other players, to be like, no, 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 just take care of yourself, protect yourself, be there, shut up some people who said you were like, the head of this. And yeah, but she was reinstated, but a lot of other players are not, and they've actually like vilified Mariona, for example, who is a very like she has a very normal person feel, so to speak, and they were like, apparently she's one of the worst amongst the 15. So there's been a lot of narratives going around, and yeah, the bottom line is you're not going to see a lot. We still don't know about Alexia, because she just came from injury, so we haven't. Yeah, she hasn't even had an opportunity to be called up, so we don't know. But yeah, you're not going to see a Barcelona-ish Spain at the World Cup. You're going to see a lot of youngsters who are very, very good, by the way. And let's not, take this out on the players who are going, because I think that would be very unfair. Players, it's like any player's dream to play the World Cup. So it's like I can't blame anyone for for chasing that dream. I think it's just, again, it's like you said, it seems the institutions being unfair to the players, treating them like garbage, and then when the players try to do something about it, they try to create this narrative that vilifies those players, and then tries to like create this rivalry between players and between clubs. It actually isn't. It's not like that. So a lot of players are maybe being instrumentalized to benefit that narrative, and it's a pity because you always want to see the best players at the greatest stages, and it's sad, honestly, because who can blame anyone for fighting for their rights? We
Right.
all can sympathize with that, I think.
Yeah, and so again, the World Cup is what's up next for a few of the Barca Femení players. And I think more than anything else, again, you want health because, again, the club season, not to say for, I mean, what is the case usually for international football? The club season, I hope, is just as important or more important than the World Cup for a lot of these Femení players. So hopefully they stay healthy. There's been way too many injuries this season in the women's game. So hopefully, again, everybody, not just Barcelona players, but everybody stays healthy for the World Cup. I can hit the ground running for what is going to be an exciting next season again for the Barca Femení. So, Ines, I know that you'll be back to help us out with that here
Thank you.
on the show. But for your work in the last, 5 days to help me out here on the show, I really, really appreciate all your
It's
time.
been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.